I think of 3867 Lafayette as a perfect example of a building that needed an intervention. This building is hard to miss. It's right there at the corner of Lafayette and 39th. The recent history, and going back 20 years or so, was one of just continual problems with occupancy, tenants, building maintenance.
The property had been a nuisance to both the Tiffany neighborhood and the Botanical Heights neighborhood because of the drug deals, and then in more recent years because it was just falling into such disrepair.
It was very important to do something with that building to stabilize that corner that would in turn stabilize Lafayette and help the development from both neighborhoods.
The building had gone through a number of owners, most of whom were absentee, and had been, repeatedly cited for building code violations and problem property violations by the city. And so we were keeping an eye on the ownership and any transfers of ownership. And then we were aware that in 2012, it had gone into foreclosure.
My partner in some real estate ventures in the Shaw neighborhood had approached me about doing some buildings along 39th Street. There was a group of buildings at the corner of Folsom and 39th and McCree and 39th Street, and we had put those buildings under contract to acquire and redevelop them. And we then made the comment about 3867 being in also a foreclosure with a different lender, and wondered, with all the investment we were making on the other two complexes, how in the world could we possibly do all that work and not try to get the 3867 Lafayette building done too.
So we started looking to investigate, what the status of the property was, found out that the entity that had foreclosed was part of a bank in Texas, Beal Bank.
So we approached the Botanical Heights group and Tom Pickle with the sales, who was the administrator of that agency, and talked about how could we possibly include that building in the portfolio of buildings we were doing along 39th Street.
Well, I think the Garden District Commission and the redevelopment plan for Botanical Heights was unusual in that it was the first, and I believe it's the only time, where a nonprofit organization was granted redevelopment rights in a neighborhood, the nonprofit being the Garden District Commission. And the GDC really was created to serve four neighborhoods, not only Botanical Heights, but also Tiffany, Shaw, and Southwest Gardens, the neighborhoods kind of surrounding the Botanical Garden.
This was a development I think the board generally thought should go forward, but there was considerable discussion and concern about what involvement the board, or GDC, should have, the Garden District Commission should have. What risks it should take, how directly it should become involved. And so consequently, there was considerable discussion about whether we should go forward, not whether we should, whether it would be a good thing, but whether we should actually commit ourselves to this project.
None of the people on the board are necessarily experts. We have a couple board members who work in development in different areas, but DeSales was really our expert for this project.
Well, DeSales, first of all, is the administrator of the Garden District, which I find to be one of the first ventures of professional neighborhood organizations helping another neighborhood organization, which I think is a key. DeSales had the experience, the knowledge to deal with banks, to get acquisition loans, and to be able to negotiate with developers.
The role of DeSales in all this was really to act as staff, as we do to the Garden District Commission, and to research options for acquiring the property. Is it possible, feasible, making recommendations to the board? Also with regard to redeveloping the property, what's feasible to do? I feel like that's a perfect role for an effective community development corporation to step in and intervene and fix a building like that. So, and our plan was to do the partial demolition and then pursue a developer to come in and do a rehabilitation of the remaining part of the building.
When Tom Pickle suggested that not only should we purchase this building, but he had this radical idea of tearing down half the building.
The two 6-unit buildings created 12 units on a very small block and provided no ability to park. Even the street parking was inadequate. So in today's world, where you need to park your car and be able to get to the building, we believe that all the years of its problems were often generated just by the lack of parking alone.
The board was convinced that to end up with a first-rate, market-rate property, we needed to provide off-street parking. This was a point of discussion that really was not in question, but again, it was a question of the risks involved and whether the Garden District Commission should take those risks.
We determined that it would really be, from a structural, physical standpoint, relatively easy to demolish half the building.
So you can knock half of it down, but you have to carefully not knock the other half down, and then hopefully leave enough of the bricks around so that you can patch up the hole you just made in the side of the building. I mean, yeah, it was amazing to watch. I mean, to drive by every day and see the progress and think, wow, how did they do that?
And we saw, because of the structural configuration of the buildings, that it would be relatively easy to take down that one portion and create a little bit of extra room for parking or for some patios maybe. And so we approached the city's cultural resources office because we know it's always controversial to tear a building down, especially in a historic district.
We would need to involve and convince the Preservation Board that it was the important thing to do for the neighborhood, that we would still be preserving the historical aspects of the building.
It had to be taken to the Preservation Board, and then it had to officially be declined or denied, and then it had to go back for appeal, and it was finally approved. And I'm sure that nobody can argue with the final outcome, but the path there wasn't easy.
Well, the impact on the neighborhood has been tremendous. There is a first-rate property that anchors that corner of Lafayette and 39th Street. There's not an issue with drugs or crime.
Well, I can never forget that all the years of driving down Lafayette to make the left turn on 39th Street to go into Shaw, that you go by this building and it would just be this beautiful structure that just looked horrible. And now you go by and there's lights on it, there's landscaping. We just know that the future's bright. I can go away 20, 30 years from now and know that that building is unlikely to be an eyesore that it was for all the years that I was in the Shaw neighborhood.
It's hard to quantify the impact, but I've seen a lot more development along the block of Lafayette just to the east of that building, whereas many of those homes were kind of beat up or boarded up. I've seen some amazing development projects happening in those homes and a lot of investment. It serves as kind of the entrance to the neighborhood, too. When you come out from under the 44 overpass, now you're no longer in the Shaw neighborhood. You're in Botanical Heights and Tiffany. And, when you would come under and see a boarded up building that's dilapidated and sad, that doesn't create a very good image of the community. But when you come under and see a beautifully rehabilitated building that's clean without litter everywhere, it makes a huge difference.
It's special in that we, both the sales in collaboration with the Garden District Commission, were able to take action to solve a real problem property, a long-standing problem property. And I think that's the role for an effective community development corporation to play, that when you have the opportunity and the means and the willingness to act and to solve a problem, you can get it done.
Not all nonprofits are equal. And the sales board years ago, I guess it's now over 20 years ago, made a decision. I happened to be at that board meeting where they decided that to help redevelop their neighborhood, they would have to take on the role of being a developer, and that they would have to themselves as board members and a staff be sophisticated enough to understand that there was a difference of just assisting in development and being a developer.
I think we can look back and say that we've been effective, and there's a lot more to do, in this city. But thinking back 20 years ago and looking ahead, I think we can only be pleased with what's happened.